Hello, everyone, and welcome to Global Supply Chain Expert Panel, Successfully Navigating Supply Chain Disruptions. Greeting to all of you who are following us live today, and also to participants of Virtual Supply Chain Summit organized by Logical Consulting and In-Store Magazine in Zagreb, Croatia. So, first of all, I would like to introduce our panelists today. We have Elizabeth Warren, President and CEO of Dialed In Partners from San Pedro, California. Patrick Daly, a Managing Director of Alba Logistics based in Dublin, Ireland. And Art Koch, Principal Consultant with Arthur Koch Management Consultant from Miami, Florida. So we are talking about disruptions today, disruptions in supply chain. In last 12 months, approximately, we have been overwhelmed with various disruptions, starting with the pandemic and lockdown, then transport and cost rising up, Suez Canal blockage, inflation of material prices, shortage of various goods, and so on. So on the other hand, if we look at last 10 or so years, we also had volcano eruption in Iceland. We had earthquake and nuclear disaster in Fukushima, Japan. And we had tsunamis, Arab Spring, a huge migration wave to Europe. So my question is, are these disruptions something new, or we just see it because we live with it in the present? What do you think, Elizabeth, about that?
Good morning to everyone, and thank you, Antonio. You know, what a difference a year makes. 2020 is we found ourselves in the perfect storm. And the shipping industry is still trying to evaluate how to sort of deal with the current situations and making constant adjustments. We hear the word over and over, unprecedented. But this unprecedented demand has really had a crunch in our capacity of everything, whether it's containers or ships. When last year from September to March, we had this unprecedented demand that was so high and so fast from anything that we had ever seen that it was just simply too much for our systems to adjust that quickly. And then, of course, that led to the congestion on land with the containers, the ships, the physical boxes that store and move that cargo. No one had ever really seen anything like this before. So, we're doing everything that we can to maximize capacity wherever we can, get every ship you can to move that cargo, to get it moved in and out of the ports as fast as possible. But it's just something that no one has ever seen before.
Okay, thank you. So what weaknesses these disruptions revealed to us, to supply chain managers, to companies? What do you think, Art?
Well, kind of touching back on your first question a minute ago, I think one of the big changes that happened is disruptions. We've always had disruptions, and we've been able to deal with the corporations and suppliers and the supply chain or the logistics networks, been able to recover from disruptions because I feel they've been more isolated. However, I feel what's happened this time is with the COVID pandemic, the disruption's been worldwide. Then you couple that in with the fact that our demand patterns changed so much. People were locked down in their homes and they were desiring things that are completely different than what they were desiring 3, 4, 6 months earlier. So that change in the demand pattern just wreaked havoc on supply chains. Then you throw in the Suez Canal. In the United States, we call it the what is it? The Great Texas Freeze, and then the backup at many of the international ports around the world. So that's been the perfect storm, so to speak. I feel disruptions will always be there. They're there to stay. It's been change is the norm in the world, and we need to know how to adapt to it. Over the past 20 years, supply chains and how much we're shipping product around the world has greatly increased. And I think it's a time to rethink where we do more regional manufacturing and shorten the supply chains into that region. But we'll still have global supply chains. They'll still be there. It's still going to be very stretching throughout the world. But I also believe that we're going to increase more regionally for assembly and manufacturing. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, excellent. So actually, like I was suggesting, these norms, these disruptions are becoming more and more frequent, and we have to adapt on them and not behave like this is happened now and who knows when. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
well, are they actually more frequent, or are media so much better to where we're able to pinpoint and hear about them and see them much faster?
yeah.
Okay. I'd like to add maybe, I think the events, the types of events we're seeing are nothing new, in the sense that if you take a historical perspective, I read quite a lot of history. And I just finished a book about the Roman Empire, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. And now I'm reading one about the Christian reconquest of Moorish Spain, which is about 1,000 years after the height of the Roman Empire. And you think the things that were happening, invasions, pandemics, inflation, natural disasters, all of these types of things have always happened. And even when I think of my own grandfather, who was born in 1905 in Ireland, and he lived through revolution here, civil war. He was in the Spanish Civil War, First World War, Second World War, just in his lifetime. So these things are not new. But I think what's the difference is we have a globalized economy now in a way that we didn't have before. And that's been driven by three things, really. The improvements in information and communications technology, the deregulation of trade and finance, and the improvements in transport technology over the last 40, 50 years, particularly containerization, air freight, port upgrades, ship upgrades, and so on. And therefore we have the world economy and the supply chains very much enmeshed in a way that they weren't before. So it's not so much that the events are new, it's the effect of the events are greater. And where we are now is we've had a succession of shocks culminating in this really big one, which is the pandemic, which is truly global. And it's really woken us up from a kind of complacent inertia that we had. We were in a kind of happy space maybe for 20 years or so. Yeah. And yeah. Boom, we've been awoken, and now I think we're reconsidering how to configure our economies and our supply chains to deal with the reality that was there, but we probably didn't realize the nature of reality fully.
Well, and Patrick, adding to what you're saying is we always had these events that occurred, but there wasn't a major one that threw everything off kilter. So you're exactly right. Sorry, Antonio.
Well, I guess the last one that maybe did that was the Second World War, right? That was truly sort of global.
Yeah. Maybe from Second World War we had a very long period of time without a lot of disruptions. Maybe I was going to mention later oil shock in 70s. Maybe this was greatest disruption in that period. But Okay, I have some questions saved for later that will where we'll continue this discussion. And now I would like to ask you, Patrick, you mentioned earlier that you had a forum with your clients and some other companies, and when I read your notes, something I mentioned, I noticed is that reactions of the managers in companies on these disruptions. So what are these reactions? How do we react on disruptions?
I was interested to hear what they said. So these were mostly managers, fairly senior managers in branch plants of multinational corporations, some of them in food and beverage and some of them in pharmaceuticals. So one of the things they said was that they had been woken up in the sense that businesses tend to become kind of inward focused a lot, particularly if you're in, say, a branch plant where you're basically executing a plan that's been handed down from on high. And they said that in the future, they're going to take a more outward oriented focus as to what is going on in terms of risks, potential risks out there, particularly in their supply chain. And some of the consequences of that might be changes in the supply base, bringing some supplies closer to home, analyzing in a more sophisticated and nuanced way what the vulnerabilities are in the bill of materials, where things are coming from, and not only in the bill of materials, but sometimes some of the accessory materials that are required for the production process, but that are not part of the product. You know, like a filter or a pump or something like that that's procured globally. Those were some of the things. Changes in procurement policy. So there's less concern, at least in the short term, about working capital, which was a big concern before, and trying to keep inventories to a minimum. So now it's more nuanced. So it's okay, well, some things we need to keep that kind of focus. Other things where we critically depend on them, maybe an active pharmaceutical ingredient or some other essential part or material, that they're investing in inventories, which is having knock-on effects for warehousing and inventory management and so on. So there's definitely a change in paradigm, but it's not kind of lean and working capital concerns are out the window. It's just that things are becoming a bit more mixed and nuanced, and maybe a bit more sophisticated and a bit more detailed. There's a certain amount of overwhelm with the magnitude of the task ahead. And a lot of them have said they're basically in a mode at the moment, which is get through the next 12 to 18 months. And then we'll think what the strategic picture is for the future. They seem to be finding it difficult to think much longer term than that at the moment, given the pressure they're under.
Yes, and what started me in this that you said that first came panic, and people, I mean, managers started to buy inventories because they were afraid of
I guess they were ordering inventory that wasn't coming, and therefore they were upping.
Classic beer game. If you know this bullwhip effect, when you start to buy stocks because there is a little change in demand, and well, the effect is large inventory. So maybe
Something that I had suspected might happen, but I didn't see. I haven't seen much evidence of it. But I think Art maybe has seen more. I thought there might be more vertical integration where people would say, okay, to secure my suppliers, I'm actually going to acquire a supplier. So there may be some of that going on, but I haven't seen it, but I suspect it must be happening.
Yeah. So we are reversing to Ford company on the beginning of 20th century. Yeah.
Like the Ford Motor Company.
Yeah.
By the rubber plantation and the iron ore mine.
Yes. Art, you wanted to say something?
No, I was just gonna, Patrick brought up about, vertical integration. I am seeing that. I've seen some of my clients reach back into the supply base and buy suppliers. And it's been for two reasons. One of them, they were running into financial issues during the pandemic and they could not afford to lose them or let them go bankrupt. And the other thing, from strategic initiatives, they'd already been looking at these kind of acquisitions anyways. And this just kind of made the perfect opportunity to go do it.
Okay, Elizabeth, you are expert in for infrastructure, supply chain infrastructure. So how these disruptions affected the supply chain infrastructure, like ports, warehouses, or last mile delivery? What do you think?
As Patrick and Art mentioned, when you're acquiring a lot of inventory, you have to have a place to put it.
Yes.
And one of the issues that we've had in Southern California, not just here, but everywhere, is congestion on the terminals, which then leads to congestion throughout the entire system. When you're buying inventory, you have to have a place to put it. Your warehouses are full. So you store it in the container, and then the container stays on the chassis. So then you get into this vicious cycle of not enough containers, not enough chassis, not enough rail cars to move it. The pandemic has really affected labor. We've had truck drivers and longshore workers that are out sick with the pandemic, with COVID, or been quarantined. So, you end up with this little vicious cycle of not enough of anything, of any of the assets that you need at the same time. We think it's starting to normalize a little bit, but certainly this is something that just has to work through the system. I was just checking the Marine Exchange here in Southern California, talking about the number of ships that we have at anchor. And yesterday they reported that we had 87 ships at the San Pedro Bay Ports Complex of LA and Long Beach, which is 10 less than we had on Friday. There's 11 container ships at anchor, 33 total ships at anchor, and 16 of those are awaiting berth. So, and then 2 more container ships arrived today. So, there's really no end in sight of the flow of cargo that's coming. Our ports of LA and Long Beach have had record years.
No one was prepared for such event and effect. Okay, Art, on this what you mentioned about inventory, and so you are like myself expert for inventory management, and as a default you says that inventory is evil. So so how do you now come to your clients and say, yeah, okay, but you have to have some inventories, which inventory is evil, which is not evil?
Well, and let me explain why I say inventory is evil. I say inventory is evil for 3 reasons. The first reason is it delays problem resolution. Okay. Well, first, it hides your problems. By hiding your problems, it delays problem resolution. By delaying problem resolution, it eats into your profits. So that's why I say inventory is evil. literally, I'm working with a group of clients right now, and today I had this discussion, a real heartfelt discussion with a client about a half hour before this started. I've been pushing them and pushing them to get their days on hand of inventory. And this kind of goes up in what Patrick was saying, really analyzing where their inventory is at much finer, because they had always been trending how much inventory they had, and they had this gut feel for their business, how much inventory made them successful. If they dipped below a certain number, they had problems. If they went too high, they had the bankers and finance yelling at them. So they had a good baseline of where they're at. All bets are off with COVID. And they had this knee-jerk reaction because the first part of COVID was to stop receipts coming in, stop cutting POs, and manage their cash. Then all of a sudden demand took off and they were caught on their back foot. And it's like, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, bring in inventory. And I'm yelling at them. I'm saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. I know you need to bring in inventory. However, you got to look at where you're bringing it in and focus on the suppliers you're having problems with, the customers that are taking off, and what the consumers are doing. More outward looking, as Patrick said earlier in the discussion. So there's a lot to focusing on the finite details and resetting how they thought is as early as 18 months ago.
So it is not so simple to say either build up inventories or cut inventories. So
No.
you have to, when we had this discussion yesterday, and I think, Patrick, you said that you have to have strategic inventories, and you have to tactical and operational inventories, and that's just what I spoke with my clients when we had this discussion 2 years ago, and now it's happening. You have to have these strategic inventories, and just last week I was with one of my clients, and he bought twice as much inventory that he needed for his production, and this year they are relaxed because they have enough of aluminum, and the aluminum price rocketed, and now they have enough. Yeah. So so it's not so simple. Yeah.
Yeah. Just about picking up on something Elizabeth said earlier with regard to shortage of assets, let's say containers. What we've seen in the last number of months, particularly since the new year, is a confluence of constraints in ocean freight. So we've seen the actual space available on sailings has diminished. We've had blank sailings. We've had a shortage of assets for the reasons that Elizabeth spoke about. And and I guess part of that is driven by the change in consumption patterns, the way people are shopping now, the types of things they're shopping for. So that has all culminated in a skyrocketing of the rates for containers, say from Far East to Europe and Far East to North America. And I was contacted by a number of clients. So my clients would generally be manufacturers and distributors and logistic services companies. And I was contacted by a number of distributors who import and distribute homeware products here in Ireland. Homeware and furniture was one, and the other was in packaging materials for the food industry and so on. And they had been hit with rate increases of something like $1,500 for 40 foot last year to sometimes 8,000, sometimes even higher this year. And part of the change that we took them through, so I partnered with another consultancy in Germany that specialized in this area. And part of the change we took them through was to establish more of a relationship with their freight forwarders and carriers, rather than living on spot rates on the markets, which is what they had been doing up to then. And this required some sort of commitment from them. It also required them to cultivate the relationship, but it's ultimately resulted in them getting rates that they're not like they were last year, but they're maybe something like $5,700 instead of $7,500. And they have some sort of visibility and security of space and assets going into the next 2 to 3 months. So I think as well, what's happening is, because of the difficulties, the shortages, the disruptions, people are looking to cultivate their supply relationships with material suppliers or with service providers much more than they would have in the past, where maybe they viewed lots of these supply arrangements as kind of transactional arrangements and not so much as relationships. I think Art, you mentioned you had seen some of this going on as well.
Yeah, last month I did an informal survey of senior purchasing individuals with my clients and past clients. So it was about, I think, 27 or 28 individuals I talked to. And I knew their methodology of how they worked with suppliers. Were they an organization that built partnerships, where they had 3, 4, 5-year agreements where they shared technology? Were they an organization that had suppliers where they would do a blanket order once a year, or and only bid out a handful of the buy each year? Or were they on a completely spot buy basis where they rebid everything? And what I learned from that, where I called and talked to them, and I kind of knew what the answer was going to be, but it was 85% of them said that if they did not have the relationships within the group that does partnerships and people that build suppliers, if they did not have those relationships, they felt their pain would be much worse. Hands down, all of them said they were feeling pain and they were feeling the pinch. But I heard a handful of them say that if they did not have partnerships or these agreements with suppliers, that they would be at the end of the line for allocations, or end of the line getting their freight across into the United States. So I found that very interesting. And Patrick confirmed the same feeling that I saw. So it's so important as we come out of this. And as Patrick said earlier, same thing's going on with my clients. They're just trying to get through the next year, 18 months. It's their hair's on fire because demands change, there's shortages. They're just trying to get through everything. But I keep reiterating with them 2 major things as we come out of this: build partnerships and build highly professional supply chain organizations. Get supply chain professionals, get these tacticians on your team. Look at it as just like you look at engineering, how you look at finance. Get the professionals in there and build partnerships within your supply base, and you'll be able to weather this more. Then you can get in and start looking at where your globalization is, where you need to regionalize it, et cetera, et cetera.
This is great piece of advice, Art. And this is just what I wanted to ask you. And just to follow up on that, I would like to ask Patrick, you wrote a whole book on supply chain relationships. And this is actually what Art said. I think something similar was premised in your book.
Yeah, I wrote a book called International Supply Chain Relationships, was published in 2019 in London and New York. It's on Amazon if anybody's interested in buying it. So yeah, I was, there were lots of reasons, there's lots of things in it, but one spark for that was a conversation I had with the supply chain manager of a client company, which is a concentrate manufacturer. There's a couple of them. There's one or two of them, and they have global operations. And here in Ireland, they have the supply chain team that looked after global supply chain. And as you know, in beverages and soft drink beverages, there's a push to remove sugar from the beverage. But when you remove sugar, in order to keep the taste, you've got to replace it with something else. But it's not just one thing; it's many things. So therefore, this across a whole range of drinks multiplies the bill of materials in a tremendous way. And the guy was saying, this is happening. We now have to get all of these different materials. They're coming from all over the world, from Latin America and from Africa and from Asia. And I only have a small team. How am I going to deal with this? And we started having a conversation about how he manages the supply chain. And basically they had a one size fits all type model that they used. And I said, well, with this team and this supply chain, that's not going to work. So you're going to have to triage the supply chain in some way. So it got me thinking about the different types of relationships that you have with different types of suppliers and service providers. And some of them you can manage almost on a formulaic transactional basis. Ones that are maybe supplying a commodity product or service that you can easily replace. There are others maybe where you have options to look for alternative suppliers, even though it might be a bit of a headache, and you have a level of relationship there that's more than transactional, more towards the relationship side. And then you have these absolutely mission critical relationships, supply arrangements that you really need to look after. So if you start to triage it like that, you can do a lot more with a smaller team and smaller resources. And that got me thinking about then the different types of relationships that you end up with in supply chain. That's one way of triaging them and thinking about them. And another way is to think of relationships that maybe are long-term or semi-permanent against ones which are like projects. They exist for a specific time, and then they disperse, and you need different skill sets to manage those and be effective at those. And those are some of the ideas that that sparked the book, some of my experiences. A lot of it as well was driven by the relationships I would see between manufacturers and logistics service providers, which would tend to be those types of relationships that are quite long-term, semi-permanent almost, where they become really strategic partners over time. So those are some of the things that are dealt with in that book.
Okay, so when you destruct supply chain, you have two major elements in it. You have relationships and you have costs. So maybe this is what we need in this kind of situations with a lot of disruptions and everything. We need to. My next question was, what about lean philosophy? And I read some articles, and they read, is lean dead, or something like that, or maybe we or managers in various corporations actually misunderstood what lean means. How do we balance between this lean on one side and flexibility or something like that, resilience, if you like, in this kind of situations? Art, what do you think?
I don't think lean is dead. I think most people really misunderstand or do not understand at all what lean is. I tell you, without lean manufacturing, the tsunami that hit Japan a few years ago, they would not have been able to recover as quick as they recovered after that. And lean manufacturing led them to be able to do that. I think the issue that got us where we're at today, I'm writing an article about for an ebook that I do with a group of people, and the future of supply chain management. And I'm kind of talking about what's happened in the past decade, or past 2 decades. And I come up with the term mass globalization I coined yesterday. And I don't know if anybody else has used that, if it's a new word, but I use mass globalization. And where I come up with it is, over the past 20 years, we mass globalized the supply chain. And the reason why we did it is due to the fact that technology allowed us to do it. Patrick picked up on it. Technology allowed us to do it. We've always had a global supply chain. However, was it done in the mass that it's been done in the past 20 years? No. All right. So technology allowed to do it. The tariffs, and Patrick brought up something I hadn't thought about, but just deregulation allowed us to do it. So we've had this. And because we were able to do it, and where there was, where local economies had, where they manipulated currencies, where you had incentives, tax incentives for steel, et cetera, where they did all these different things to where it was attractive to go there. We were shipping things all around the world, and it just didn't make sense. Now that we're coming out of this, I think what's going to happen is we're going to build our products in regions and not be shipping things 2 and 3 times across the pond. There was an example at the height of this before the pandemic hit. I think it was apples or pears were being picked in, I think, Chile, and shipped to Asia to be packaged and turned around and shipped back to Chile or Argentina. And that just doesn't make sense. And there's examples like that everywhere. That's anti-lean, all right? It just doesn't make sense. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to come, and the pendulum swung one way. We're going to come back, and I really see us being to where we do things more regional. However, there's still going to be a lot of product that it makes sense to buy from far away and bring in, but it's not going to be the extent of what we had. Then at the same time, within that regional, we'll really use the lean tools to improve our responsiveness, our flexibility, and our predictability. Those are the 3 I look at with my customers. I go, you have to be responsive, you have to be flexible, and you have to be predictable. All right. And for years, we were so predictable because of the demand patterns were not crazy until the pandemic hit. And they were able to lean out all this stuff going, 5, 6, 7,000 miles. It worked fabulous. It just took this event to kind of wake us up. Sorry, I probably talked too long on that.
It was excellent. Yeah, you reminded me when you said that Toyota and some other lean companies went from or through these or some other crisis very fast because of lean. But I would like to add not just lean, because Western managers actually misunderstood what lean means. Lean without relationships about which you two talked, and Art and Patrick, you can't be responsive, as you said. You can't be responsive if you don't have partners that could help you in this kind of bad times, crisis, and so on. So if you go only lean, you go to anorexia, and you're not able to be responsive. But if you have good relationships, good partnerships, you can go or out of a crisis relatively fast and relatively unharmed in serious way. So I think this could be one of our how do you say
outcomes or results?
Yeah, result of this panel to try to come to the roots of lean, because I think we all of us misunderstood roots of lean.
Yeah, sometimes there's a problem with language and what things are called. So lean probably wasn't the best term, probably in the way that supply chain is really not a good term, because it's not a supply chain, rather it's a supply network of some sort, or it's more a network than a chain, right? And lean kind of implies that there's no fat and there's no resilience, which is kind of a misnomer, because that's not what it is. And I don't think it's dead either. It's just going to be working within new constraints. And you know, one of the constraints that we saw already before COVID that was regionalizing supply chains were ecological concerns of transporting low value items back and forth across the world. That, as Art said, didn't make a lot of sense. But the lean, albeit a misnomer, but the lean approach, even though our supply chains did in fact have a lot of resilience and redundancy in them, but they were fundamentally different, say, from the supply chains of the 1960s and 1970s. And what that's done for us is it's kept inflation at bay. So those of us who remember the 1970s, who are old enough to remember the 1970s, remember living in a world of very high inflation, where wages and prices seem to be going up very quickly all the time. And then that moderated, and then it stayed moderated for a long, long time. And it still stayed moderated even now. And part of that is the effect of supply chain management and the efficiency and the alignment and the way inventories can be reduced quickly when there's a recession. So it's moderating our inflation, and it's shortening our recessions. And that's why we've enjoyed the period over the last 20, 30 years of we've had recessions, but they've been relatively short. So I guess in the long and the short of it, I don't think lean is dead. It's probably the wrong name, and it's probably going to adjust to a new set of constraints.
Yes, actually, you are right. We don't lean doesn't mean. I mean, it does mean that you don't have a fat in your supply chain, in your body, but what you have to have is muscle. So you can't be without lean without muscle. Then you are anorexic and you can't move. You're very fast. Yeah. So okay. So lean is still live and kicking. Okay, Elizabeth, I have one tricky question for you. For example, if a Suez blockage scenario happens in Panama Canal, what do you think would happen in America?
That's a very good question. We have options on the West Coast. We have a lot of ports that are growing. We have Prince Rupert up in Canada. I live in Southern California, so I really want cargo to come to California. But as a shipper, you have options. There are other ports here in the West Coast that they can come to. We hope that the Panama Canal does not have the same impact. I mean, the Suez Canal costs billions of dollars a day. So we hope that doesn't happen again. But we do have other options on the West Coast. And California's ports, LA and Long Beach, as we have seen with the COVID pandemic, we can handle that influx of cargo. It might take you a little bit longer, but we will get it through.
Actually, all these disruptions are maybe just peaks out of the water, and bigger problems are beneath the surface. What we maybe my question, that's why I said it was tricky question. It was not about what about Panama or Suez Canal, but how companies are prepared, or ports are prepared, or purchasing managers are prepared for this kind of events. Do they have some kind of I don't know, scenarios to prepare, and to have some other ways of procuring the same goods and something like that?
Well, if you're talking just about shipping, when you're shipping the containers across the Pacific Ocean, from the Pacific Rim, their shippers that used to be sending cargo just from Asia used to only have just Southern California as their option for big ships. The big ships, we were the only ports, LA and Long Beach, that could handle those large container ships. Now we have Seattle, Tacoma, the Pacific Northwest. We've got Prince Rupert. So there are other options on the West Coast, and then some of the other smaller ships can go through the Panama Canal. So you do have other options to be able to ship. In the old days, you didn't have that. They call it now the four-corner strategy in the US, where you're looking at, if there is an issue at one port, what are your options? So you're looking at going through the Panama Canal to get to the East Coast ports, going through the Suez Canal across the pond, get to the East Coast. Evergreen, I don't know if you guys saw it. Art, you probably saw it, but the Today Show last week showed an Evergreen container ship sailing into the port of New York, New Jersey, and it was the largest container ship they had ever had come through on the East Coast. So the larger ships are now calling on the East Coast of the U.S.
It's an interesting question you put to Elizabeth, Antonio, because it kind of illustrates how kind of some old-fashioned things still matter. Geography still matters. So you can see the map on the behind Art there. You see the United States as these big oceans on either side and big open coasts. So the type of litigation strategies that you would need in the US probably different than, say, if you're in Southern Europe, where you've got the Strait of Gibraltar at one side and you've got Suez Canal at the other. And China as well is very hemmed in. So China feels hemmed in by South Korea and Japan and Taiwan and Philippines and Indonesia and all of these countries, which they perceive as being aligned with the West. So that kind of explains some of their hedging and some of their aggression, maybe. And Russia is hedged in by Europe on one side, by the Arctic Ocean on the other, and by Japan and the US on the other. So depending on where you are, it's still very geopolitical, and that feeds into supply chain management as well, which are things that I think lots of people, in the way they're trained technically, don't really think about those types of things. So you kind of need people now in businesses who, on the one hand, are technically competent, whether they're engineers or logisticians, but they also need to be in tune with the way the world is physically, geopolitically, current affairs, and what's going on. And it's the blend of those things, I think, that the companies that can bring those together best will do best in the future.
Excellent point, and thank you for this smooth transition to to this part that I called trends. And excellent point. Geography is one huge element of supply chain, and but also there are some but when you said companies need people or experts or some other, I don't know, individuals that have a big picture about this. And I think that this is expected from us as consultants. We need to have this kind of view over over particular elements and processes, and to have this big picture. What I wanted to speak now about is how new trends like, for example, demography, a power shift of from west to east that we are witnessing now, new technologies and so on, how they correspond with these disruptions. But my point is, these all problems that actually reveal itself during these disruptions were always there. And like Art mentioned, our inventory actually hides problems. So we were very complacent with ourselves and minding our own business, and then something happens and all problems pop up. But these problems are not from yesterday. These all problems are here. So what I wanted to ask is, did these disruptions actually reveal something that we need to address regardless of these disruptions? Who feels like answering?
Call on one of us.
Art.
It's just like in school. I opened up my mouth first, I got called on. You know, you're bringing up something earlier in the conversation we talked about. I think we talked about how to kind of mitigate some of these issues we see. And I hear with my clients, they want to dual source everything. And I'm giving them caution on that. I'm saying you don't want to add the complexity within your supply base of having two suppliers making the same product. So what you want to look at is finding a company that has a sister plant to where they're making it in two locations at different parts of the world. All right. So look at it strategically, build this relationship with the supplier to where you're still going to have to qualify it, but you're only going to have to qualify one supplier at two locations, which is a different cost associated with trying to qualify two suppliers at two different locations. So we got to get people to think differently like that. One of the trends I see is increased professionalism within the supply chain. I do see a more of a focus on their inventory. All right. And they're looking at the top dollar amount, but they're also looking at where they're having problems differently. Before, it was pretty much, we're good. Interest rates are low. We don't have to worry about it too much. Borrowing money's pretty free. But this pandemic has opened up the door on, they're looking at the total cost of ownership. And I hear that discussion more than I heard in the past. So I feel much more, I feel we've made a transition with that. The other element that I think we've made a big transition with is, before, supply chain was just looked at as in procurement or one department within the company. CEOs that I'm dealing with now understand it's the entire enterprise is responsible for supply chain. Not all of them, but the ones that have been burnt really bad, where it was all hands on deck, they're getting the importance of it through the entire organization. So I see that as trends: increased professionalism, understanding the total cost of inventory, the total cost of ownership, and that supply chain is spread across the entire organization, just not in the procurement team or a wedge of supply chain.
Yeah, in these big factors that you spoke about, Antonio, these mega trends that are going on regardless of what else is happening. So demographics is one. So the world population is going to peak and begin to decline. Maybe in 20 years time, maybe in 30, maybe we're not quite sure, but that's going to happen. We already know that. We have the climate change agenda that's going to change the way we generate energy, the way we transport, and so on. We have social media and all the effects that's having, and on one hand can have effects on business reputation, on the other hand it's causing geopolitical changes and so on. And I think companies simply don't pay enough attention to these things, or not enough of them do to a sufficient degree. Some do, and benefit from it. So a local example here, I live in the Republic of Ireland, which is part of the European Union, and our neighbour, the United Kingdom, has now left the European Union and with this Brexit process that's been going on. So what's that meant for companies here? Well, for lots of local food producing companies that exported a lot to the UK, they've got to diversify. So it's now 2021. The Brexit referendum was in 2016. The campaign started sometime in 2015. So this thing has been a live issue for 6 years. And here we are in 2021. And many companies have diversified, particularly into other countries in the European Union. But it's so surprising how many haven't. And it's only now that, Brexit has actually happened and the disruptions are there, that they're, crying out because things are difficult. You say, listen, guys, you've known about this for 6 years. Well, you're not paying attention. So that's just one local example, but it's the same for all of these other mega trends. They're there and visible. I think it's that oftentimes people are just so busy and so absorbed and so internally focused that they simply don't pay the right amount of attention to these things. And it's dangerous.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. People are very focused on operational business, and they don't see these trends. CEOs are also focused on 1 year or something like that, very short time for results. And for example, demography, this is a huge trend, and it is not new. I read some books of by Peter Drucker, and he wrote about demography, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and he just said, read statistics, demography statistics, and you will know what to do. But we didn't read these, and now, okay, the population is old, and there is no workforce, and now it's this disruption. Yeah. Okay, Patrick had to leave. He has some other engagements, and we are in our last minutes of this panel. So I would like to ask you for your final thoughts. What do you think? What happens in the next 18 or maybe not 18, maybe 12 to 18 months, and what kind of disruptions could we expect, or how could we or our viewers, managers prepare for similar disruptions? Elizabeth, do you want first?
Sure, I'll go first. Well, just to kind of add on to what Art and Patrick were just talking about, I think companies need to pay attention. They need to pay attention to the environmental issues, the regulation regarding climate change, regulation. California's got all kinds of regulations coming out, whether it's for truck drivers becoming employees. So I think that there's going to be more of that. So I think that just across the board, we just need to pay attention to all the regulatory issues that are out there and legislation. I think we also need to be agile. And this is something that we've been talking about in supply chain for, more, as long as I've been around in it, which is a long time. So we've been talking about being agile. And I think that we just need to keep teaching that and keep practicing that. One of the trends that we kind of see here is that, at least in the short term, as things begin to normalize a little bit, we get people vaccinated, things are opening up, people are getting out in the US, that maybe that demand in the cargo is going to come down a little bit and maybe normalize, because we're hoping that people will start spending more money on services, going out to restaurants, going out to sporting events, restaurants, travel. So there might be a little less of that demand for retail goods because we're going to start spending that money elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. Art?
I'm like Elizabeth with this. What's going to happen is there's been a significant growth in furniture, home improvements. Housing prices have increased in North America and in Europe during the pandemic. But what's going to happen as people come out, I'm calling it the raging 20s. All right. You look at 100 years ago, after the Spanish flu pandemic, you had the raging 20s. We're going to have the exact same thing in the 2000s. We're going to have the raging 20s. People are going to want to get out and party. This is crazy, but people are hitting the gyms because they're now open. They want to get in shape. They're getting plastic surgery because they want to look good. Sexual protection purchases is skyrocketed because people are getting out and they want to play. Travel is going to be taking off. Hotels and clothing is going to be taking off. So that's going to be a trend that you're going to see for probably the next 6 to 36 months. The economy is going to erupt in that area. The other thing is we do have a shortage in labor in North America. I think it's a short-term shortage because people are got comfortable being at home doing with less because you weren't spending as much money. But as they get out and they start seeing their friends get out and going on vacations or partying or visiting people and buying new clothes, it's a consumer economy. North America is a consumer economy. Europe is pretty much a consumer economy, not as bad as the United States, but that's going to drive this trend. Long-term, the mega trends, I think the population is huge, and we cannot forget about that and the shift in population. That's very important to pay attention to. Additionally, everything associated with climate change. And also investing, the three that I talk about that are important in the megatrends: population, the ecology, climate change, and also you're investing from where you put your money when you invest it from a standpoint, does that fit what's important to you? Okay. So that investment structure, you just recently saw with, I think it was Exxon, there was a takeover of the board, all right, to where they want Exxon to go more focused on climate change and transition themselves out of fossil fuels. So you're going to see a lot more of that in the mega trends.
Okay, thank you. So we left a lot of material that we haven't touched in this panel because there is a lot of things. Technology we didn't touch, demography, population, we just scratched the surface, and there are a lot of other things. but I think there will be a chance for that in our next panels. I want to so we went through disruptions in general. We analyzed what are consequences of disruptions, reactions, and some of the remedies for them, and some advice. As top consultants, we meet these kind of challenges every day and help clients to resolve or mitigate them. So if you, as viewers of this panel, feel that you need to talk more about some of these issues, feel free to contact us on supply chain consulting, supplychain@consultingsociety.com. We'll be happy to connect and talk with you and see what, who, and how we can help you, because we are here to help. And thank you for watching our live session, and to all who watched us on Supply Chain Summit in Zagreb, and also the ones who download this video later and enjoy in it. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Okay. I think there is
Just us kids.
Yeah, just us.
I'm gonna open. I gotta open up my window. I'm roasting in here.
Now you'll have to.
Everybody relaxes.
Yeah. When I do that, it messes with all my lighting. And fortunately, I haven't had to do. Unfortunately or fortunately, while I've been here, I haven't had to do many of these discussions like this.
No, I wanted to.
Yeah, like that. Throw the tie over. Elizabeth, don't do that.
No,
Your husband will get mad.
Why I was dressed like this? I wanted to look like
Yeah.
On this supply chain summit, so it would be like we did it live. So
Yep.
I wore my pearls. You wore your tie. I wore my pearls. So.
Good for you.
Yeah, excellent. So how do you think we were?
You
doing?
tell us. You tell us.
You were great. So what do you think about my moderation?
Me personally, I think you did fabulous, because I know English is a second language for you. And I think it's probably even a third or fourth language. And I think you did absolutely awesome. So I congratulate you.
Absolutely. Congrats.
Yes.
Thanks. Yeah.
And I know that Lisa probably wants me to moderate something, but you know, the depth of the questions and the discussion, I just don't know how I could ever moderate, because I'm taking notes, listening to all of you guys talk. And I'm like, oh, that's really good. Oh, that's really good. So like, I don't know how in the world I would ever be able to just say anything more than, please expand on that. Please expand on that topic. So.
I'll tell you a dirty secret, Elizabeth. When you talk, I take notes too. So.
Oh. Well, thank you. But I always feel like it's hard for me to really contribute once you guys really get into that, that manufacturing, and the depth of information is just amazing. And I really enjoy it.
Your depth on freight and the ports is the same thing. You know, when you start talking, I just sit back and I just listen and start taking notes, because when you were talking about how many ships were out there and the aspect of how they don't work 24 hours because you have nowhere to put it, et cetera, it's fascinating. I love it all. And then the 4 points where you're talking about the 4 points, the four
corner strategy.
4 corner strategy. Yeah, that stuff, I learned something every time, and it's like, man. Now the Panama Canal has 2 canals. They have the old narrow one and the wide one. Can everything go through the super wide one or no? So stuff still has to stop in on the West Coast.
I think that the largest ships that can go through the Panama Canal are around 14,000 TEUs. So yeah, and they're already talking about expanding the locks again, just for that reason, because now we're getting 18,000 ships are normal.
Yeah.
And they're even looking at 22,000.
I think that America is the owner of Panama Canal, or not?
No,
Not anymore.
no, Panama owns it now. It was turned over to the.
Okay, but I think that Panama Canal is more maintained than Suez Canal. I think, but I don't know. I just saying that Egyptians didn't touch it after, I don't know, English or French went. So you have to invest in this. Yeah. So it's.
My perception with that is you're correct, Antonio, that there's been continuous investment in the Panama Canal because they widened it, and I forget how many years ago, because there's two canals next to one another. And so they've done that, and which I think was just fabulous. And then when you get into the main lake structure, I don't think you have some of the issues that you have with the Suez Canal. Yeah. The operative word is think. I need to have experts like Elizabeth tell me how wrong I am, and I'll listen.
Yeah, and Egyptians only now they start to think about widening the Suez Canal.
Yeah.
Well, I think that there's going to become a point, though, that how large are the ships going to actually get? Because is there we kind of have a term, a joke, but it's serious. It's called race to the bottom. You know, you're building bigger and bigger ships. When you get ships that big, you really don't make money on your Art, Antonio, you know the economic term where you get your
cost benefit.
Yeah, when you get to a certain point of
break even point, huh?
Yeah,
break even point where you get to a certain point where you're not making money anymore. Now it's costing you more money.
Yeah.
Size is not, just because it's bigger, it's not always better.
This point is longer and longer to get. Yeah.
Well, and you think about it, that a big asset like that, it's kind of like the airplanes.
Yes, like
they have to keep they measure their turnaround time because they got to keep that flying. They got to keep that up in the air with passengers, and if it takes longer to load it and longer to unload it, that means it's sitting idle.
Yeah.
So it's a diminishing return, and where then you're talking about ports digging deeper channels for them to get in and out, and more costly. I just think it's all.
Yeah, this is exactly what you said on the end. Total cost of ownership, total cost of inventory, of supply chain, of everything. What are total cost of this big ship? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Billions. When it's all said and done, by the time that you build the ship, by the time you operate the ship, and then the cost of operating it.
And the risks that happened, what happened in Suez, because they are so big, there is a bigger risk to block the canal. Yeah. So.
Well, and also, something we didn't talk about, but is one of the big risks nowadays is what do you want to say, the internet piracy, where I'm lost for a word, but where they cracked into the pipeline last month and they shut it down, and the pipeline company paid, I think, a $4 million ransom.
These hackers.
The hackers. Then yesterday they did this to a meat producing company in the United States. So they grabbed a hold of them and did the same thing.
The pandemic, these hackers.
Yep. And then I forget how many years ago it was, but Mondelez is one of my clients, and Mondelez is the big food, the snack food company that owns Nabisco. And I was in one of their facilities, and they got hacked, and they had a ransomware where they took over all their computers, and that came out of the Russian and the Ukraine. And it initially was focused from Russia to the Ukraine power grid, but it snuck out of the power grid and it took over all these different companies, because Mondelez has a facility there, and it went through their facility in the Ukraine. Then it spread out through all of their network of their factories. Well, did you know, is it SAC, the big shipping company? Am I pronouncing it right?
SAC?
What's the big
Maersk?
Maersk, there you go.
Yeah.
Maersk. It hit them, and they had ships that lost control, and they're trying to manually take over these ships, and some of them were docking. Can you imagine, you know, if somebody hacked into that and took those over and they lost control of their ships? Holy crap. And that happened to Maersk.
Like in the movies, huh?
Yeah, it's crazy. So I think of anything that's a risk in the next five years is that, until corporations get serious about protecting their internet access and their back doors.
Yeah, I had that down on my things to look out for, and along with environment and climate. I had security and cybersecurity safety initiatives, and I was in a hurry, so I didn't mention them. I should have. But
I think you're
that is
spot on with that, Elizabeth.
Yeah, it's really something that is, I don't know how you get a handle on that across the world, across every industry, whether it's hospitals and healthcare and manufacturing, the electric grids, water, they're worried about water. It's everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, well, hey, I gotta run, okay?
Okay.
All right, so thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you
And
all.
absolutely wonderful chatting with you. And thank you for having me part of this, okay?
Thank you guys for everything as well. It was a lot of fun. I learned something, and hopefully I contributed a little bit. So.
Yeah.
I am so glad you're on here, because I'm learning so much about, I need to learn it, and that's good. And I also know if somebody had questions, who to point them towards. So that's
all right. I'm here.
All right.
Okay.
Take care.
Yep.
A lot of fun. Thank you, everyone.